Hi YouTube, Darth here. This is Yes or No, a weapon review series where I give a clear and concise answer as to what weapons you should be using. By request, today I'm looking at the 870P Magnum Shotgun from Battlefield Hardline. It's a close quarters weapon for the Enforcer class with some interesting interchangeability that I'll get into. But should you be using the 870P? Yes or no? No. And I've got to say that this is probably one of the worst weapons I've ever reviewed. There's definitely a number of appealing aspects about this weapon and some negatives that are uniquely related to pump action shotguns and shotguns in general. But before I tear this weapon apart, let's look at the positive aspects. The single shot damage output of the 870P at close range is undeniable. If you get a chest or headshot on an unarmored target, it's a dead target. The 870P's minimum time to kill is literally 0 seconds plus any flight time for your projectiles. There's no denying the pleasurable feeling of pulling the trigger on what is a guaranteed kill if your projectiles connect. A nice feature of the pump action shotguns in Battlefield titles is that you can load and shoot on demand. This lets you fire a number of rounds, reload, and immediately fire again between each shell loading. Compare this to magazine-fed weapons where you have to go through the complete loading animations before firing again. It can definitely come in handy when you're being pressed by multiple targets. The 870P, when properly outfitted with attachments, is a hipfire monster. In fact, this is the way I'd recommend using the weapon if you're going to be playing with buckshot or you're in close quarters situations. This is really where the weapon shines, and it really cuts a swath of destruction when fired from the hip. This shotgun has no recoil whatsoever. You point at a target, and outside of spread and bullet drop, that round is going exactly where you pointed, even if you're strafing from left to right. There's enough deviation between drop and spread that adding recoil control to this weapon would probably be overkill, so there's definitely a premium on landing every shot. The positives for this gun are what you'd expect from a pump action shotgun in the Battlefield series. If you can land a headshot literally every time you fire this weapon, it's pretty amazing. But I think you should be using other weapons that don't have the list of negatives I'm about to go through. So probably one of the nastiest little surprises the 870P is going to have in store for you is the same problem Battlefield 4 has with shotguns, and that's the way buckshot lands in your shotgun's crosshair. The circular target reticle dictates the possible starting point for your buckshot. From that starting point, the shot spreads, so you can end up with more than half of your buckshot landing outside the target area. The further you are from your target, the bigger that spread gets. The time between shots on the 870P is about 950 milliseconds. This translates to about 62 rounds per minute. To give you an idea of just how slow that is, between your shells the K10 can kill you 9.5 times. The MPX can kill you 6 times and change, and the M16A3 can kill you a little over 4 times. It's a detraction that makes the weapon terrible at clearing out groups of players in Hardline. Somebody is going to notice you killing all their buddies. Related to the slow firing nature of this weapon, the low DPS of the pump action shotgun comes into play really quickly if you need to follow up your shots. This could happen for any number of reasons. Chance of a bad spread, target is just far enough, you're using a 12G slug and get a limb shot, or your target is wearing body armor. Because that first shot isn't guaranteed, even if you're on target, the low damage over time starts to bite hard, and the more players you find yourself engaged with, you're going to find yourself surprisingly underpowered pretty quickly. One of the things that will defeat you time and again with the 870P is that it simply lacks any real power at range. This is particularly true with buckshot, where anything beyond 15 meters is going to start treating you pretty harshly. You can extend the killing power somewhat with the slug round to about 20 meters, but unless you're fighting a particularly bad player, every automatic in the game is going to clobber you at range. And there's a ton of maps in Hardline where you're not going to be in a good position to use this shotgun at all. Something else to think about for the range problems of this gun is that the slug, like Battlefield 3 and 4, has a very low velocity. You're going to have to lead your targets by quite a bit, and unless you land that headshot, you're not going to kill them in one shot beyond 20 meters. The 870P slug flies at only 200 meters per second, and the buckshot is only marginally faster but much more affected by spread. Whenever you fire the 870P, it's going to knock around your screen like somebody beat your agent in the head with a bat. It completely resets before you can fire a follow-on shot, but if you're trying to line up your sights based on your gun's position, you're going to have a very hard time with that second shot. So the 870P has all the same problems that the Battlefield 4 pump action shotguns have, and it's actually worse in Hardline. In Battlefield 4, you only had to worry about targets having body armor that would absorb 10% damage. Enough buckshot on target would still mean that they died. In Hardline, because armored insert is a 50% damage absorption, you're going to have to hit some targets twice, guaranteed. Taking a second shot against a target heads up pretty much doesn't happen with the 870P. Unless of course you're lucky. Playing with the 870P reminds me a lot of when I was grinding out all the bolt action service stars in Battlefield 3. It's a hugely risky proposition in close quarters that puts me at incredible risk if I miss, is still a failure under some hits, but a chance of an instant win if I hit my target directly on. And actually, that's another point against the shotgun. What's the purpose in using the 870P if 3 of the bolt action rifles have similar damage models with much longer ranges and faster bullet velocities? The knockout is one shot kill out to 50 meters compared to 20 with the much slower slug on the 870P, and the knockout has a similar rounds per minute. Finally, is there really an advantage in that one-shot kill if more than half the weapons in Hardline kill in less than a quarter of a second? Particularly when you have to land body and chest shots with that first shot and have no real follow-up, it certainly doesn't feel like this gun has a purpose other than pure style points. Oh, and yes, chain killing with a weapon this mediocre does feel great. Normally this is the part of the Yes or No series where I tell you all about the recoil. The thing is, the 870P doesn't have any. But don't let that fool you, you're not shooting a laser beam. The spread of the weapon with buckshot depends on whether you're aiming down sights or not. You'll get a tighter spread when aiming than you will when hip firing. But that buckshot is still going to spread quickly the further from your target you get. Remember, the targeting circle is not a perfect representation of where your shot is going to land. It can land well outside the circle, particularly at close range. So it's not all doom for the 870P, and there is a bit of power that you can squeeze out of this weapon. First and foremost, you absolutely must use this weapon exclusively in close quarters situations. Most conquest maps in Hardline are going to be unsuitable for this purpose, with the possible exception of Hollywood Heights. There are close quarter segments to these maps, and if you're going to use the 870P, you'll need to stick to those areas. The 870P does best in game modes and maps that play to its close quarter strengths. Heist, Blood Money, and Team Deathmatch are probably the best candidates. In fact, this weapon is pretty much the ultimate defender's weapon. If you can get enemies to come to you rather than the other way around, a lot of the problems with this weapon are eliminated. That doesn't help you at all if you're trying to play the objective, but it does turn you into the ultimate corner or door defender short of a trip mine. Next, if you're running this weapon with buckshot and you're mobile, I highly recommend using hipfire as opposed to aiming down sights. The time you shave off from the weapon aiming animation is about 300 milliseconds with a sight, which is more than enough time for every automatic in the game to kill you. You'll want to get that single shot advantage against other players, and hipfire has impressive power at close quarters ranges of less than 10 to 15 meters. If you're looking to squeeze a tiny bit more range out of the 870P, you'll need to use the 12G slug rounds. If you use slug rounds, you'll need to know that the slug travels especially slowly. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I did some frame-by-frame analysis and it appears to fly at about 200 meters per second. By comparison, Battlefield 3 and 4 slugs flew at 300 and 380 meters per second respectively. This makes some sense as across the board, hardline velocities are generally slower. So you'll have to lead your targets at range by quite a bit, which translates into certain doom if they're strafing and shooting at you. In essence, you're firing at them with a very poor bolt-action rifle. Finally, if you want to force a way to get into close quarters, you can consider using the riot shield as one of your gadgets. I really didn't have a lot of success with this gadget other than covering some possible flanks, as if you press the issue with a single target, usually they'll figure out a way to take you down before you can switch to your shotgun. In reality, it's better to outsmart your targets with the 870P rather than trying to square off with them. Now, I took a look at BFHstats.com to see what other players in top positions were using for this shotgun. A slight majority of those players tended to prefer running this weapon with iron sights, a laser sight, and no barrel attachment. So what did I prefer? After some experimentation with sights, chokes, ammo, and a number of other setups, I settled on the following. For my sight, I kept with the iron sights. This is because my primary strategy is speed with the 870P and my tendency to use buckshot with hipfire. With the 870P, I don't aim down sights very often, and when I do, it's in very close proximity. There is actually about a 100 millisecond savings in time to aim down sights between the 870P irons and the sighted aim down sights animation. That's right, you aim down sights faster with no sight. So it's in your best interest to run with no sight if you want to draw slightly faster. For my choice of accessory, I put a laser sight on the 870P. If I'm going to be hipfiring, it would be counterproductive to choose anything else from the accessories. The tactical light is a nuisance and it's not going to win you any battles, and the 12G slug is what you would use if you want to have a little more range with the shotgun. But my attachment setup is all about getting out that first shot quickly, so the bonus to hipfire from the laser sight just makes complete sense in the accessory slot. Finally, for my muzzle accessory, I chose not to run with anything and keep it naked. Both the full choke and the modified choke penalize hipfire, so it would make no sense to run with those muzzles on a hipfire loadout. There's an alternate loadout where you can focus on full choke and it gets a little bit tighter spreads on every shot, but that requires you to aim down sights for every engagement. I just don't feel it's worth applying an extra 200 to 300 milliseconds of drawing time to the start of every fight, even if that shot is more accurate. Aiming down sights all the time for shotguns made sense in BF3 and 4, where the time to kill is generally much higher, but not in Hardline, especially because the choke costs you the ability to hipfire this weapon reliably. The 870P shotgun is definitely a high-risk weapon, and the rewards can be humorous every now and again, but I definitely wouldn't recommend it to the general population as its shortcomings are pretty extreme. If you fancy yourself a challenge taker, then this weapon would be right up your alley as it requires intense precision to be a reliable killer and does not permit mistakes. As I said earlier, for most people, this weapon is a solid no on the recommendation from me. If you prefer close quarters combat, you should definitely look at the engineer PDWs, as they offer exceptional time to kill of generally under 200 milliseconds and have plenty of follow-up if you miss your first shots or if more bad guys come running around the corner. My personal favorite is the MPX, but the K10 is the king of close quarters if giving up some longer range power to be that way. That's it for this episode of Yes or No. If you found this video helpful or insightful, please leave it a like. If there's something you think I missed, or if you have a different take on the 870P Magnum, please leave a comment below. Be sure to leave a comment if you have a weapon you'd like to see in a future episode of Yes or No. If you're new around here, check out my channel and please consider subscribing. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.